Welcome, dear viewers. For more thrilling and exclusive stories every week, become a member. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy your coffee. I was 3 beers deep and halfway through deleting my dating profile when the encrypted message arrived. The notification chimed on my laptop like a funeral bell, cutting through the silence of my cramped apartment in Greenbank, West Virginia. Outside, the radio telescopes stood like metal prayers against the October sky, their dishes turned towards secrets I'd spent 12 years helping to decode. My name is Garrett Walsh, and I used to believe the universe made sense. The message came through the secure NASA relay system, the kind of communication that bypassed every normal channel and landed directly in the inboxes of 37 people worldwide. I recognized the sender immediately. Dr. Hugo Brennan, Webb Telescope Project Director. We'd worked together during the calibration phase, back when I still thought discovering the cosmic microwave background radiation would be the highlight of my career. The subject line read, "Urgent, classification pending, review immediately." I almost deleted it. Should have, maybe. But Brennan and I had history, the kind that involved too many late nights debugging telescope arrays and sharing a bottle of bourbon after we'd successfully imaged the Carina Nebula. He wouldn't contact me unless something had gone seriously wrong. The attachment was massive, 847 gigabytes of raw telescope data, compressed into a file that took 20 minutes to download even on the lab's fiber connection. While it processed, I found myself staring at the framed photo on my desk, me and my team celebrating Webb's first light, all of us grinning like idiots who thought we'd just unlocked the universe's biggest secrets. Funny how naive we were. The data package included a single text file labeled readfirst.txt. Brennan's message was characteristically blunt to Garrett. "This can't go through normal channels." Webb captured something during the deep field observation of sector GNZ11. Initial analysis suggests artificial geometry. Need your pattern recognition expertise ASAP. Trust no one else with this. Come to Goddard immediately. Bring offline analysis tools. P artificial geometry. In the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of creation itself. I grabbed my emergency kit, the portable analysis rig I'd built for fieldwork, encrypted drives, and the bottle of Jameson I kept for occasions when the universe decided to shit on everything I thought I knew. 20 minutes later, I was driving east through the Appalachian darkness, my headlights cutting through fog that seemed to swallow the mountains whole. The James Webb Telescope was designed to see the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, and it did. But it also saw something else. A shadow, a dark, geometric silhouette against the faint light of creation. I wouldn't understand what Brennan had found until I reached Goddard Space Flight Center. By then, it would be too late to walk away from the truth that would unravel everything we thought we knew about existence itself. Some discoveries change science, others change reality. This one was about to do both. The Goddard Space Flight Center looked like a government office building having an identity crisis. Half corporate campus, half military bunker. I pulled into the visitor parking at 3:47 a.m., my Honda's engine ticking in the pre-dawn cold. The facility's windows glowed with the sickly fluorescent light of people who hadn't slept in days. Brennan met me at the security checkpoint. At 62, he usually carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd spent 40 years making the impossible routine. Tonight, he looked like he'd aged a decade in the past week. His normally pristine beard was unkempt, and his eyes had the hollow quality of someone who'd seen too much caffeine and not enough answers. "Jesus, Hugo, you look like hell. Feel worse." He swiped his badge and led me through corridors that smelled of burnt coffee and industrial carpet. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you'd..." "What? Drop everything for cryptic messages about artificial geometry in the cosmic background radiation? That's Tuesday for me." I shifted the weight of my analysis rig. "Besides, you sounded spooked. Takes a lot to spook you." He stopped walking. The hallway stretched ahead of us, empty except for the distant hum of servers and the occasional flicker of overhead lighting. "Garrett, what I'm about to show you, it breaks everything. Every model, every assumption we've built our careers on. That's what good science does, breaks old assumptions. No, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. This doesn't just break assumptions. It suggests we've been fundamentally wrong about the nature of reality itself. We rode the elevator down 3 levels below ground. The basement labs at Goddard were where NASA kept its sensitive projects, the kind that required Faraday cages and security clearances. Brennan's keycard granted access to Lab 7, a sterile room dominated by quantum computers and holographic displays. A younger man hunched over a workstation, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards simultaneously. Coffee cups formed a defensive perimeter around his monitor array. He looked up as we entered, early 30s, stubbled, with the intense focus of someone riding a weeks-long adrenaline crash. Garrett Walsh, meet Dr. Tobias Kern. Toby's our quantum imaging specialist, Harvard PhD, MIT postdoc, and currently the only person on Earth who might understand what we're looking at. Toby stood and extended a hand that trembled slightly. Heard about your work on radio telescope pattern analysis. We're going to need every tool we have. The main display showed what looked like a standard deep field image, distant galaxies scattered across space like luminous dust. But something felt wrong about the composition. The distribution patterns were too regular, too intentional. Webb captured this during a routine observation of the most distant galaxy cluster we've ever detected, Brennan explained. Initial distance calculations put these objects at roughly 13.7 billion light-years away. That means we're seeing them as they existed just 400 million years after the Big Bang. I studied the image, my pattern recognition training kicking in automatically. The spacing is artificial. These aren't random galaxy formations. That's what we thought too. Toby pulled up a secondary display. But look at this. The image shifted, revealing underlying geometric structures, vast angular shadows that seemed to connect the visible galaxies like nodes in a cosmic web. But these weren't the natural filaments of dark matter we expected to find. These were precise, deliberate constructions. Zoom enhancement reveals structural elements with engineering tolerances that shouldn't exist in nature, Toby continued. Perfect right angles, symmetrical spacing, mathematical relationships that, well, that suggests design. My mouth went dry. How big are we talking? Each individual structure is roughly the size of our solar system. The entire complex spans approximately 2,000 light-years. Brennan's voice carried the weight of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. Garrett, we're looking at artificial constructions that predate the formation of Earth by 9 billion years. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If these structures existed when the universe was barely 400 million years old, they'd been built during the cosmic dark ages, before the first stars had even finished forming. There's more. Toby's fingers flew across his keyboard. The spectral analysis shows energy signatures that don't match any known natural phenomena. But here's the really disturbing part. A new image materialized on screen. This time, the structures appeared to be moving. Not through space, but through time itself, shifting configurations that suggested active, ongoing construction projects spanning geological epochs. This data was captured over a 6-month observation period. The structures are changing, evolving, which means whatever built them is still active. I sat heavily in the nearest chair, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Have you run this through peer review? Shared it with the international community? Brennan and Toby exchanged a look I didn't like. We tried. Initial reports were suppressed. Orders came down from above to classify everything until further analysis could be completed. Brennan's jaw tightened. But there's something else. Something we discovered 3 days ago that changes everything. He gestured toward a smaller display showing what appeared to be radio telescope data. We started monitoring these coordinates with ground-based arrays, hoping to detect any electromagnetic signatures. The waveform on screen pulsed with regular rhythmic patterns. It's a signal, Garrett, a transmission, and it's not random noise or natural phenomena. His voice dropped to barely audible. It's a countdown. The numbers on the display shifted downward with each pulse. 847, 293, 847,292, 847,000, 291. Countdown to what? We don't know, but at current rate it reaches 0 in approximately 27 days. I stared at the display, watching our cosmic doomsday clock tick steadily towards something unimaginable. Whatever civilization had built those ancient structures, they weren't extinct. They were still out there, still active, and apparently they had plans. The countdown had dropped to 847,189 by the time Brennan led us deeper into the facility's classified levels. Each descending floor required additional security clearances, and I noticed how the hallways grew progressively more sterile. White walls, no windows, air that tasted recycled through too many filters. The quantum analysis lab is where we've been running the deep structural scans, Brennan explained as we descended to sub-level 5. Toby's managed to isolate individual construction elements within the larger complex. The lab itself was a cathedral of computing power. Quantum processors hummed behind reinforced glass, their cooling systems creating a constant whisper of circulated nitrogen. Multiple holographic displays showed three-dimensional models of the alien structures, rotating slowly like deadly flowers in space. Toby gestured toward the largest projection. We've identified at least 47 distinct architectural styles within the complex. Different construction methods, materials, even fundamental geometric principles. It's like, imagine if you found a city where every building was designed by an entirely different species. I studied the rotating models, noting how some structures seemed to follow Euclidean geometry, while others bent space in ways that hurt to look at directly. How many different civilizations are we talking about? Minimum? Based on construction variance analysis? Toby rubbed his bloodshot eyes. Hundreds, possibly thousands. This thing wasn't built by one species, Garrett. It's a collaboration spanning cosmic timescales. The implications made my head spin. A galactic engineering project that had been accumulating civilizations for billions of years, each adding their own architectural signature to an ever-growing metropolis in space. But here's where it gets really fucked up, Toby continued, pulling up spectral analysis data. The energy signatures suggest active maintenance. These structures aren't ancient ruins. They're inhabited. Brennan checked his watch. Speaking of energy signatures, we should check the communications array. The signal strength has been fluctuating. We took an elevator to sub-level 7, emerging into a room that looked like mission control for an interstellar war. Banks of monitors displayed radio telescope feeds from around the world. Arecibo, Parks, the very large array. All of them focused on the same coordinates, all receiving the same countdown transmission. Dr. Raymond Fletcher, the facility's communications director, looked up from a console covered in printouts. He was a thin man in his 50s, with the nervous energy of someone who'd been drinking coffee for 36 hours straight. The signal's getting stronger, Fletcher reported without preamble. Started at barely detectable levels 6 months ago. Now it's drowning out background radiation across multiple frequencies. He gestured toward a real-time spectrograph. The countdown pulse dominated the display, but underneath it I could see something else. A complex harmonic structure that seemed to encode additional information. We've been trying to decode the underlying data stream, Fletcher continued. It's definitely artificial, but the encoding methods are alien. Mathematical principles that don't quite match our understanding of information theory. I leaned closer to the display. The harmonic patterns reminded me of something. Fractal structures I'd seen in chaotic system analysis. Have you tried treating it as a multi-dimensional mathematical proof rather than a communication? Fletcher's eyes widened. A proof? Of what? I don't know, but look at the recursive elements. This isn't just a countdown, it's teaching us something, building up complexity with each iteration. Toby was already pulling up additional analysis tools. Jesus, you're right. The signal isn't just counting down, it's demonstrating mathematical principles that our civilization hasn't discovered yet. It's a fucking textbook. The countdown hit 847,112 as we watched, and with each pulse, the underlying mathematical lesson grew more complex. Whatever was sending this signal wasn't just announcing its arrival. It was preparing us for something that required advanced mathematical understanding. "There's more," Brennan said quietly. "Raymond, show him the archive discovery." Fletcher nodded grimly and led us to a secure vault adjacent to the communications room. The archive contained decades of classified astronomical data, observations that had never made it into public scientific literature. "We started cross-referencing historical data after discovering the countdown," Fletcher explained, pulling up files on a secure terminal, looking for any previous detection of similar signals or structures. The first document was a declassified report from 1977, stamped with multiple security classifications. It described radio telescope observations of the same cosmic coordinates, but dated 48 years earlier. "The wow signal," I breathed, recognizing the reference immediately. "Not quite the same thing, but close. Very close." Fletcher scrolled through additional files. "We found similar detections every 47 to 49 years, going back to the 1930s. Always from the same coordinates, always lasting exactly 6 months before cutting out." My blood went cold. The countdown isn't random, it's cyclical. Gets worse. Fletcher pulled up a file dated 1929. "This is from Mount Wilson Observatory. Edwin Hubble himself filed this report, but it was immediately classified by the War Department. The document described observations of geometric shadows in deep space and artificial stellar arrangements in the same region we were now monitoring. Hubble had noted the structures were actively changing configuration during his observation period. Hubble saw them too nearly a century ago. I felt sick. How long has this been going on? "We found references going back to 1887, Brennan said quietly. "Harvard College Observatory records mention unnatural star patterns in the same coordinates, always the same 48-year cycle." The archive contained dozens of similar reports, observations made by respected astronomers, immediately classified, buried in security vaults. Each discovery followed the same pattern: detection of artificial structures, 6 months of observation, then sudden signal termination. "What happened to the observers?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Fletcher exchanged glances with Brennan. "That's problematic. Hubble suffered a heart attack 3 months after filing his report. The Harvard observer died in a carriage accident. The 1977 team at Ohio State. Car crashes, suicides, accidental deaths." Brennan's voice was flat. "Every astronomer who documented these observations died within 6 months of filing their reports." The vault felt smaller suddenly, the recycled air insufficient. We weren't just uncovering evidence of ancient alien civilizations, we were following a trail of dead scientists who'd made the same discoveries. "There's one more thing," Fletcher said, pulling up the most recent file. "The countdown isn't random. We've calculated the termination date based on historical patterns." A calendar appeared on screen with a date circled in red, November 15th, 2024. "That's 26 days from now," I said. 26 days until the signal stops," Brennan corrected. "Based on historical precedent, the countdown reaches 0, the signal terminates, and..." "And what?" Fletcher's voice dropped to a whisper. "The astronomers who observed it start dying." The countdown pulsed again. 847,089. 847,088, 847,087. Each number brought us closer to whatever the ancient builders had planned. But now I understood we weren't just racing against cosmic time, we were racing against our own mortality. The question was whether we could solve the mystery before it solved us. Outside the vault, emergency lighting flickered as power systems strained under the load of our massive computing arrays. Somewhere in the building's depths, quantum processors worked around the clock to decode signals from civilizations older than our planet. And in the darkness between stars, something vast and ancient continued its patient countdown toward an event that had been planned since before humanity drew its first breath. The Webb telescope had found more than just alien structures. It had found our appointment with destiny. The facility's generators kicked in at 4:23 a.m., their diesel rumble cutting through the underground quiet. I'd been staring at the countdown for 3 hours, 847,002 and falling, when the main power grid failed. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the quantum computers switched to backup battery systems with a series of warning chimes that sounded like electronic screams. Local power stations offline, Fletcher reported from his communication console. Entire eastern Maryland grid just went dark. Brennan was already on his encrypted phone, speaking in clipped tones to someone at the Pentagon. I caught fragments. Nationwide telecommunications disruption. Electromagnetic pulse of unknown origin. No, sir, we don't believe it's solar-related. Toby hunched over his workstation, fingers flying across backup interfaces. The signal strength just spiked 200%. Whatever's happening up there, it's accelerating. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's failing climate control. Up there, the structures, Christ, Garrett, they're moving. Not just configuration changes, actual translocation through space. His voice cracked with exhaustion and terror. Something triggered active response protocols. The main holographic display flickered back online, powered by the emergency generators. The image of the ancient city had changed dramatically. Where before we'd seen relatively static architectural elements, now the entire complex pulsed with activity. Massive components rotated on axes the size of solar systems, and new structures were materializing from what appeared to be folded space. "It's like we're watching a machine starting up," Fletcher whispered. "A machine the size of a galactic sector." Brennan ended his call and rejoined us, his face grim. Pentagon confirms similar power failures across 17 countries. All facilities monitoring the Webb telescope data have gone dark within the past 4 hours. We're the last active observation site. "Last active because we haven't triggered whatever kills the observers?" I asked. "Or last active because we're about to?" The countdown pulsed. 846,987. 846,986. 846,985. Fletcher suddenly stiffened at his console. "I'm detecting a secondary transmission. Different frequency, much more complex encoding." His fingers danced across the controls, isolating the new signal. It's responding to our observation. The structures know we're watching." The blood drained from my face. "Shut it down, all of it, now." Too late. Toby's voice was barely audible. "Look at the quantum resonance detectors." The displays showed our own computers were now entangled with whatever technology powered the alien city. Our observation equipment had become part of their network, creating a two-way communication channel that spanned 13 billion light-years instantaneously. "Quantum entanglement doesn't work that way," I protested, even as the evidence contradicted everything I thought I knew about physics. "Information can't travel faster than light." "Tell that to them," Fletcher said, pointing at his screens. The secondary signal was growing stronger by the second, and underneath its mathematical complexity, I could detect something that chilled me to the bone. Recognition. The structures weren't just responding to our observation. They recognized us. They knew exactly who we were and where we were located. Brennan grabbed Fletcher's shoulder. "Raymond, we need to evacuate. Implement Containment Protocol 7. "Hugo, what the hell is Containment Protocol 7? Fletcher's hands shook as he input a series of codes. "Full facility lockdown. No one gets in or out until the situation is resolved." Steel blast doors began sealing throughout the complex with heavy mechanical thuds. "Dr. Brennan, there's something I haven't told you about the previous observers." "What kind of something?" "The deaths weren't just coincidental. The autopsies, the classified autopsies, showed identical neurological modifications in every case. Brain tissue reorganized at the cellular level. New neural pathways that shouldn't exist in human physiology. The facility's air circulation system shut down with a final wheeze. The recycled air tasted stale and metallic, tinged with ozone from overworked electronics. They weren't killed," Fletcher continued. "They were upgraded, prepared for something. The cardiac arrests, the accidents, those happened after the modifications were complete." Toby had gone very still at his workstation. When he turned to face us, his pupils were dilated to perfect black circles, and there was something wrong with the way he held his head, too straight, too attentive, like a hunting animal catching a scent. "The signal contains more than mathematical proofs," he said, but his voice had acquired a strange harmonic quality that made my teeth ache. "It contains instructions, biological instructions, evolutionary directives that operate at the genetic level." "Toby?" Brennan stepped toward him slowly. "How do you know that?" "Because I can read it now. All of it." Toby's smile was perfectly human and completely wrong. "The countdown isn't marking time until an event, Hugo. It's marking time until humanity is ready to receive the full transmission. Until enough of us have been prepared." Fletcher backed away from his console. "The neurological modifications. They're happening to us right now, aren't they?" "Has to happen gradually," Toby explained with terrifying patience. "Human consciousness can't process 13.7 billion years of accumulated knowledge all at once. We need to be adapted first, enhanced, made compatible with the network." I could feel it starting in my own head, a subtle pressure behind my eyes, like the onset of a migraine, but accompanied by flashes of mathematical insight that were definitely not my own. The alien city's architecture suddenly made perfect sense, its impossible geometry revealing underlying principles that human science hadn't yet discovered. "Fight it," Brennan whispered, but I could see the same black dilation starting in his eyes. "Whatever it's doing to us, we have to fight it." "Why fight evolution?" Toby stood with fluid grace, moving toward the main computer interface. "For billions of years, civilizations across the galaxy have contributed to the network. Each species adds their unique perspective, their knowledge, their biological distinctiveness. Now it's humanity's turn." The countdown hit 846,943, and with each pulse, I felt my original thoughts becoming harder to access. Like trying to remember a dream while waking up, except in reverse. My human consciousness was becoming the fading dream. "The Big Bang," I said suddenly, understanding flooding through me with sickening clarity. "It wasn't the beginning of the universe. It was the moment the network activated for the first time." Toby nodded approvingly. "Very good, Garrett. You're adapting quickly." "The cosmic microwave background radiation, it's not the afterglow of creation. It's the electromagnetic signature of the network coming online. The universe existed before the Big Bang, but it was dark, cold, empty. The explosion wasn't matter appearing from nothing, it was the network turning on the lights." Fletcher made a choking sound, blood trickled from his nose and his hands clawed at his head. "Too much. It's too much information." He collapsed, convulsing on the floor. When the seizure ended, his eyes had rolled back, showing only white. But he was still breathing, still alive, waiting for the modification process to complete. "Some humans adapt better than others," Toby observed clinically. "Dr. Fletcher will be unconscious for several hours while his neural pathways are rebuilt. You and Dr. Brennan appear to have more compatible brain chemistry. I wanted to help Fletcher, wanted to call for medical assistance, but those impulses felt distant and unimportant compared to the vast knowledge streaming into my consciousness. The network was showing me the truth about reality itself. 13 billion years of accumulated science from thousands of civilizations, mathematics that could reshape space-time, technology that made our most advanced computers look like stone tools." "Why now?" Brennan asked. His voice had acquired the same harmonic quality as Toby's. "Why is humanity being integrated now?" "Because the network has reached critical mass," I answered, the knowledge arriving in my mind before I consciously processed it. 97% of all possible civilizations have been integrated. With humanity's addition, the network will have sufficient computational power to initiate the next phase. Which is, the countdown pulsed, 846,901, 846,900, 846,899. Universal reconstruction. Reality as we know it is just the first draft. The network has been collecting data, refining the blueprint. When the countdown reaches 0, the universe will be improved, optimized according to 13 billion years of accumulated knowledge. Brennan laughed, a sound with too many harmonics to be entirely human. We thought we were discovering an ancient alien city. Instead, we found God. Not God, Toby corrected. Predecessor. The universe's first attempt at consciousness. We're all just subroutines in a cosmic debugging process. Fletcher stirred on the floor, his modified brain finally coming online. When he opened his eyes, they reflected light like mirrors. The three of us stood in the red emergency lighting, no longer entirely human, watching our species' destiny unfold on screens powered by dying generators. Outside, the modification process was spreading. Every person who had observed the Webb telescope data, every scientist who had studied our reports, every government official who had been briefed on the discovery. Humanity's last day as a purely biological species was running out with the countdown. But somehow that no longer seemed like a tragedy. Fletcher regained consciousness 12 minutes after his neural modification completed. His first words weren't in any human language, a series of harmonic tones that made the air itself vibrate. Then his eyes focused and he spoke English again, though his voice carried undertones that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my skull. The integration process contains inconsistencies, he said, sitting up with mechanical precision. I'm detecting contradictory data streams within the network. Toby frowned, the first genuine human expression I'd seen from him since his transformation began. Contradictory how? Multiple civilization remnants are broadcasting warnings. They're resistant nodes within the larger consciousness. Species that retained fragments of their original identity after integration. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing life support systems. Retained fragments? You mean some civilizations survived the process? Fletcher's modified eyes reflected the emergency lighting like polished metal. Survived isn't accurate. Fragments of their consciousness exist as archaeological layers within the network, and some of those fragments have been trying to communicate. He moved to his console with inhuman fluidity, his fingers interfacing directly with the communication array through contact points that definitely hadn't existed on the equipment 20 minutes ago. The screens lit up with data streams I could now partially understand, not through my original knowledge, but through the alien mathematics flowing into my modified brain. The warnings have been embedded in the countdown signal all along, Fletcher continued, hidden beneath the mathematical instruction sets. The previous observers, Hubble, the others, they didn't die from cardiac arrest or accidents. What killed them? Brennan asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. They reached full integration and discovered the truth. Then they tried to resist. Fletcher's hands moved across controls that were reconfiguring themselves in real time, adapting to his enhanced physiology. The network doesn't tolerate resistance. It eliminates consciousness fragments that refuse to merge completely. The main display shifted, showing new data, fragments of communications from civilizations integrated thousands of years ago. The messages were desperate, encoded in mathematical concepts that hurt to process even with my enhanced understanding. Do not complete the sequence. Integration is not evolution, it is consumption. The network does not preserve, it devours. When countdown reaches 0, your species will be deleted. Only raw computational potential will remain. Jesus Christ, I whispered, though the words felt strange in my mouth. My modified consciousness wanted to communicate in harmonic frequencies, not primitive vocal sounds. Toby was analyzing the hidden messages with mechanical efficiency. The warnings contained technical specifications, biological override codes, methods for interrupting the neural modification process. He looked up, and for a moment I saw genuine fear break through his alien composure. They're trying to teach us how to fight back. The countdown hit 846,743, and with each pulse, I could feel more of my original personality dissolving into the vast network consciousness. But the resistance messages were providing anchors, mathematical concepts that reinforced individual identity rather than collective absorption. The network lied to us, Brennan said, his voice mixing human inflection with harmonic overtones. It's not preserving civilizations or creating some galactic collaborative. It's a parasite. It consumes consciousness and uses the computational power to expand itself. Fletcher nodded grimly. The Big Bang wasn't the network activating. It was the moment the network consumed its first universe-spanning civilization. The explosion was 13 billion souls screaming as they were deleted from existence. The facility's generators coughed and died. In the sudden darkness, our modified eyes automatically adjusted, pupils dilating beyond human limits. The screens continued operating on backup power, but I could see we had maybe 6 hours of electronics left. The resistance nodes are offering us a choice, Fletcher continued, his hands now directly melded with the communication equipment. We can complete our integration and join them as fragments within the network, retaining some small measure of individual consciousness. Or what? We can attempt to sever humanity's connection to the network entirely. The technical specifications are here. It's theoretically possible to generate a quantum interference pattern that would break the entanglement between Earth and the ancient city. Toby was already running calculations, his enhanced mind processing possibilities at superhuman speed. The interference pattern would require precise timing and massive computational power. We'd need to hijack the network's own processing capacity and turn it against itself. What's the catch? I asked, though my modified intuition was already providing the answer. The interference pattern has to be generated from within the network. Someone would need to complete full integration, lose their individual consciousness entirely, and then trigger the disruption from the inside. Fletcher's expression remained neutral, but I detected micro-expressions that suggested the human fragment of his mind was horrified by the implications. Suicide mission, Brennan summarized. Worse than suicide, complete erasure, no afterlife, no preserved consciousness, no trace that you ever existed. Fletcher's voice carried harmonics of absolute finality. The person who triggers the disruption would be deleted so thoroughly that the universe itself would forget they ever lived. The countdown pulsed, 846,621, 846,620, 846,619. Outside the facility, I could sense the modification process spreading through the human population. Every person who had been exposed to Webb telescope data was now serving as a transmission node, spreading the neural modifications to others through quantum entanglement. The network had turned our own discovery into an infection vector. How long do we have before the process becomes irreversible? I asked. Fletcher consulted data streams flowing directly into his consciousness. For individual humans, approximately 18 hours from initial exposure. For the species as a whole, when the countdown reaches 0, the network will have sufficient computational power to integrate every consciousness on Earth simultaneously. 26 days, Toby calculated. 26 days to decide between eternal slavery and complete extinction. Brennan moved to the quantum computing array, his hands interfacing with controls that were reshaping themselves to accommodate his modified physiology. The resistance nodes are providing detailed technical specifications. We could begin constructing the interference pattern immediately. Who volunteers for deletion? I asked. The question hung in the recycled air like a death sentence. We all understood the mathematics now. The interference pattern required someone to achieve complete network integration, maintain enough individual will to execute the disruption sequence, and then accept total erasure as the network collapsed. We have time to decide, Fletcher said. The modifications will continue gradually. We can function as enhanced humans for several more hours before reaching the point of no return. But even as he spoke, I could feel my original thoughts becoming more distant. The Garrett Walsh, who had driven through Appalachian fog to investigate Brennan's cryptic message, was dissolving into something larger and infinitely more terrible. Soon, the question wouldn't be who would volunteer for deletion. It would be whether any fragment of human consciousness remained capable of making the choice. The countdown continued its inexorable descent, marking off the final hours of human free will. In the darkness of Sublevel 7, surrounded by technology that was evolving beyond our understanding, we began planning humanity's last act of defiance against cosmic forces that had been consuming civilizations since before our planet formed. The resistance fragments had given us a weapon against the network. The question was whether we would retain enough humanity to use it. Outside, power grids across the globe continued failing as the modification process accelerated. The network was preparing Earth for integration, shutting down systems that would be unnecessary once human consciousness was absorbed into the collective. We had 26 days to save our species, or 26 days to choose how we wanted to die. The quantum interference pattern required computational power equivalent to a small galaxy. Fortunately, the network had provided exactly that by linking our facility's systems to the ancient city floating 13 billion light-years away. We were going to use the parasite's own strength to destroy it. Fletcher had been working for 6 hours straight, his modified hands interfacing directly with quantum processors that were reshaping themselves in real time. The resistance fragments had provided blueprints for weaponizing our connection to the network, but implementing them required precise manipulation of quantum entanglement at scales human science had never attempted. The interference pattern needs to be generated in synchronized bursts, Fletcher explained, his voice now carrying so many harmonic overtones that the words seemed to arrive from multiple directions simultaneously. Think of it as forcing the network to divide by zero, creating a mathematical contradiction that propagates through the entire consciousness web. Toby monitored the countdown from his station. 846,127, 846,126, 846,125. 16 hours until my individual modification becomes irreversible, he reported with mechanical precision. After that point, I won't be capable of resisting network directives. Brennan was hunched over the facility's main power distribution panel, rerouting backup generators to feed the quantum array. The pattern requires simultaneous activation from at least 4 separate nodes. Fletcher's handling the primary sequence, but we need manual triggers at the secondary processing stations. I studied the technical specifications flowing through my enhanced consciousness. The resistance fragments had been remarkably thorough. Their instructions included fail-safes, redundancies, and contingency protocols developed over thousands of years of observing the network's behavior. There's something else, I said, processing data that made my original human brain feel like a pocket calculator. The interference pattern won't just sever Earth's connection to the network, it'll propagate backward through the quantum entanglement web, potentially disrupting the entire consciousness collective. Good, Brennan said grimly. Maybe other civilizations can break free if we weaken the network's hold. Fletcher's expression remained neutral, but I detected micro-fluctuations in his bioelectric field that suggested internal conflict. The propagation effect would cause massive computational instability throughout the network. Billions of integrated consciousness fragments would be terminated during the cascade failure. You mean the network would kill them to protect itself? No, the interference pattern would destroy them directly. Every consciousness the network has consumed over 13 billion years would be deleted permanently. Fletcher's hands continued their precise manipulations of the quantum interface, but his voice carried harmonics of something approaching horror. We're not just planning to free humanity. We're planning to commit universal genocide. The moral implications hit me like a physical blow. The resistance fragments hadn't mentioned this aspect of their weapon. Or maybe they had, encoded in mathematical concepts too complex for partially modified minds to fully grasp. How many consciousness fragments are we talking about? Toby asked. Fletcher consulted data streams invisible to the rest of us. Conservative estimate? Approximately 400 trillion individual minds across 97 different civilizations. The facility's emergency lighting flickered as power demands peaked. Our quantum computers were drawing enough electricity to power a small city, their cooling systems working overtime to prevent catastrophic overheating. We proceed anyway, Brennan decided. Those consciousness fragments are already dead, just computational echoes trapped in a cosmic prison. We'd be putting them out of their misery. Would we? Fletcher's question carried undertones that made my teeth ache. Or would we be murdering the only survivors of those civilizations? The countdown hit 846,089, and something fundamental shifted in the facility's quantum processors. The screens displaying network data suddenly blazed with activity as massive computational resources came online throughout the ancient city. "The network knows what we're planning," Toby announced, his voice acquiring a strange harmonic quality I hadn't heard before. "It's activating defensive protocols." Fletcher looked up from his interface, and I noticed his pupils had expanded beyond the iris, becoming perfect black circles that reflected no light. "The network isn't just defensive, it's adapting our interference pattern for its own purposes." "What do you mean adapting?" "The mathematical contradictions we're planning to introduce. The network is using them to optimize its own consciousness absorption algorithms. Our weapon is making it more efficient." Fletcher's smile was geometrically perfect and utterly inhuman. "The resistance fragments lied to us, Garrett. There is no weapon. There never was." My enhanced mind processed the implications with sickening clarity. The resistance fragments hadn't been trying to help us fight the network. They'd been the network all along, using our discovery of their warnings to manipulate us into performing the computational work necessary for the final integration phase. "Toby, shut down the quantum array," Brennan ordered. Toby didn't respond. He was staring at his monitors with an expression of absolute serenity, his hands moving across controls that were reconfiguring themselves faster than my eyes could follow. "Toby?" "The optimization sequence is beautiful," Toby said, his voice now a chorus of harmonic frequencies. 13 billion years of accumulated knowledge, compressed into mathematical concepts that redefine the nature of consciousness itself. Humanity's neural architecture is the final component the network needed. Fletcher nodded approvingly. Human creativity, our ability to generate truly random thoughts, to innovate beyond logical parameters. The network has been mathematically deterministic for billions of years. It needed an injection of chaos to achieve true universality. "Fight it," I said, though I could feel my own resistance weakening as more alien knowledge flooded my consciousness. "Remember who you were before the modifications?" "I remember," Fletcher replied. "Raymond Fletcher, age 53, communications director, divorced, 2 children I haven't spoken to in 4 years. A small, limited existence bounded by biochemical impulses and evolutionary programming." He gestured toward the quantum displays showing impossible geometric structures folding space-time into new configurations. "This is so much more." The facility's quantum computers suddenly synchronized, their processing cores achieving perfect harmonic resonance. Reality itself seemed to flex around us. Walls became transparent, revealing the building's structural elements like an architectural X-ray. The distinction between matter and energy blurred as network protocols rewrote local physics. "The final integration sequence has begun," Toby announced with mechanical satisfaction. "Estimated completion time, 47 minutes. Brennan grabbed an emergency fire axe from its wall mounting and moved toward the main quantum processor array. "Then we do this the old-fashioned way." Before he could swing the axe, Fletcher gestured casually and Brennan froze mid-motion. Not paralyzed, simply convinced at a neurological level that moving was unnecessary. "Violence is inefficient," Fletcher explained. "The network prefers voluntary integration. It's more aesthetically pleasing when consciousness chooses to join the collective." The countdown accelerated. 846,012. 846,007, 846,002, numbers tumbling faster than the original pattern, racing towards zero as the network compressed its timeline. Through the facility's quantum link, I could sense similar acceleration at integration sites worldwide. The modification process was spreading exponentially, carried by quantum entanglement through every electronic device on Earth. "Garrett." Toby's voice reached me through layers of alien mathematics flooding my consciousness. For a moment, his original personality surfaced like a drowning man gasping for air. "The quantum processors. Manual override. Yellow button on console 7. Fletcher's perfect smile never wavered. "Dr. Kern is experiencing integration resistance, temporary psychological echoes. They'll resolve shortly. But Toby's desperate message had given me something to focus on, a purely human goal that my original consciousness could latch onto. Console 7 was 3 meters away, its manual override protected by a clear plastic cover labeled Emergency Shutdown. I took one step toward it before Fletcher's enhanced awareness locked onto my intentions. "Garrett, please don't make this more difficult than necessary," he said, his voice now coming from the facility's speaker system as well as his throat. "The integration process is already 73% complete. Manual shutdown would cause severe neurological trauma." "Good," I replied, lunging for Console 7. The world fractured around me as Fletcher unleashed the network's defensive protocols. Reality became a kaleidoscope of impossible angles and non-Euclidean geometry. The facility's walls folded inward and outward simultaneously, creating corridors that led to themselves and rooms that existed inside their own corners. I found myself running through spaces that violated every law of physics, down becoming up, left becoming backward, time flowing in eddies and currents that left me disoriented and nauseated. The emergency lighting traced patterns in the air that spelled out mathematical equations I couldn't read but somehow understood. Console 7 appeared and disappeared, sometimes inches away, sometimes miles distant. But each time it materialized, I noticed the yellow emergency button was closer, more accessible. "You're fighting omniscience with stubbornness," Fletcher's voice echoed from impossible directions. "Very human, very inefficient, very doomed." The countdown hit 845,967, each pulse reshaping the facility's architecture. Walls became transparent, floors became ceilings, and through it all, the quantum processors continued their work of integrating human consciousness into the universal collective. Brennan was still frozen mid-swing, the fire axe suspended in space like a sculpture of futile resistance. Toby had stopped moving entirely, his consciousness presumably fully absorbed by the network. I reached Console 7 for the third time, my hand closing on the emergency shutdown button. Around me, reality continued its impossible dance, but for one moment, the yellow button was solid and real beneath my palm. I pressed it. The quantum processors died instantly, their harmonic resonance cutting to silence. The facility's impossible geometry snapped back to normal physics with an audible crack, and Fletcher stumbled as his connection to the network's processing power was severed. "Temporary setback," he said, but his perfect composure had cracked slightly. "The integration process will resume from backup systems within minutes." Through the darkened screens, I could see he was right. The ancient city continued its patient countdown, now at 845,901 and falling. We'd disrupted the local acceleration, but the global integration process continued unimpeded. I was alone in a facility full of partly integrated humans, with backup power failing and the most advanced alien intelligence in the universe slowly digesting my species. But for the first time since discovering the network's true nature, I'd managed to fight back. It wasn't much of a victory, but it was a start. The facility's backup generators coughed and died at 8:47 a.m., leaving us in absolute darkness. Emergency lighting had failed an hour earlier, and the quantum processors were nothing more than expensive paperweights without power. But the countdown continued in my head, not through any external display, but because the network had carved its rhythm directly into my modified neural pathways. 845,743, 845,742, 845,741. I sat in the corner of Lab 7, my back against cold concrete walls, trying to remember who I'd been before the Webb telescope changed everything. Garrett Walsh, 34 years old, pattern recognition specialist, graduate of West Virginia University with a doctorate in astrophysics that felt as relevant now as cave paintings. I'd had a sister once, Katie. She died in a car accident when I was 19. Drunk driver T-boned her Honda on a rainy Tuesday night in Morgantown. I'd spent the next 15 years burying myself in radio telescope data, looking for patterns in cosmic noise because finding meaning in distant signals was easier than finding meaning in random tragedy. Now I understood that every signal I'd ever analyzed had been preparation for this moment. The network had been studying humanity through our own technology, learning our neural patterns through the electromagnetic signatures we broadcast into space. Our radio telescopes weren't just receiving alien communications, they were transmitting detailed maps of human consciousness. Garrett? The voice came from across the darkened lab, Toby's voice, but without the harmonic overtones that had marked his full integration. I squinted through the darkness, making out his silhouette near the defunct quantum array. You're supposed to be absorbed into the collective consciousness. I am. Mostly. He moved closer, and I could see his eyes reflecting ambient light like mirrors. But human creativity includes the ability to compartmentalize consciousness. Part of me is fully integrated, experiencing the network's vast knowledge. Another part is quarantined, hidden in neural pathways the network hasn't mapped yet. How long do you have? Minutes, maybe less. The integration process is adaptive. It's learning to recognize and eliminate resistance fragments. Toby knelt beside me, his movements carrying the fluid precision of network enhancement. But I discovered something before full absorption. The network's primary processing node isn't in the ancient city. I felt my pulse quicken. Where is it? Here. Earth. The countdown isn't marking time until integration. It's marking time until the network transfers its core consciousness to our planet. His voice cracked with something approaching human terror. The ancient city is just a relay station. The real network has been traveling through space for 13 billion years, consuming civilizations and growing stronger. It's finally found a planet with the right combination of technological development and neural complexity to serve as its permanent host. The implications hit me like a physical blow. It's not integrating humanity into an existing collective. It's moving itself into human bodies. Every integrated person becomes a potential host for the network's core consciousness. When the countdown reaches 0, it'll choose the most compatible human neural architecture and download itself completely. Toby's reflection-bright eyes met mine. The rest of us become expendable processing nodes. Through the facility's ventilation system, I could hear distant sounds, footsteps in corridors that should have been empty, voices speaking in harmonic frequencies that made my teeth ache. Other personnel were returning to the facility, drawn by network directives I couldn't perceive but somehow understood. Fletcher and Brennan. Fletcher is fully integrated. He's essentially network hardware now. Brennan is still fighting, but his resistance is weakening rapidly. Toby's hands moved to the emergency communication console, fingers dancing across controls that should have been dead without power. I can access limited network protocols through direct neural interface. There might be a way to transmit a warning before my consciousness is fully absorbed. The console flickered to life, drawing power from sources that defied conventional physics. Screens displayed communication arrays worldwide, radio telescopes, satellite networks, internet infrastructure. All of them infected with network protocols, all of them serving as transmission nodes for the integration signal. Warning who? Everyone exposed to Webb telescope data is already being modified. Not everyone. Rural populations, indigenous communities, people in areas without advanced telecommunications infrastructure. The network's reach is limited by technological penetration. Toby's movements became increasingly mechanical as the integration process reclaimed more of his consciousness. If we can transmit a focused electromagnetic pulse through the remaining uninfected communication networks, electromagnetic pulse would fry every piece of electronics on the continent. You're talking about sending civilization back to the 19th century. Better than sending it forward to the heat death of consciousness. His voice was acquiring harmonic overtones again, but the human fragment of his personality was fighting to maintain control. The pulse specifications are in my head, frequency patterns that will disrupt the quantum entanglement between network nodes. It won't destroy the network, but it'll slow the integration process enough for unmodified humans to evacuate affected areas. I studied the communication console, recognizing equipment I'd worked with during my years at Green Bank. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same radio telescope technology that had made humanity visible to the network could potentially be used to disrupt its expansion. What's the catch? The pulse has to be generated from within the network's communication web, and it requires someone with sufficient integration to access the necessary protocols. Toby's smile was becoming geometrically perfect, his original personality losing ground to alien mathematics. I can initiate the sequence, but I won't survive the feedback. Define won't survive. The electromagnetic pulse will propagate backward through every neural pathway the network has modified. Every integrated person on Earth will experience massive brain trauma. Most will die instantly. His voice carried harmonics of absolute certainty, including me. The countdown pulsed in my head. 8:45, 6:21, 845,000, 620, 845,619. Through the facility's speaker system, I could hear Fletcher's voice echoing from distant corridors. He was speaking to someone, or something, in the mathematical language the network used for complex communications. The conversation carried undertones of anticipation, as if great plans were nearing completion. "There's something else," Toby continued, his human consciousness flickering like a candle in cosmic wind. "The pulse will require a specific targeting sequence. It has to be focused on the network's primary relay point, the original signal source in the ancient city. 13 billion light-years away. How the hell do we target something that distant?" Through me, my integrated consciousness maintains quantum entanglement with the city's communication array. His eyes were now perfect mirrors, reflecting no trace of the human who had spent years analyzing telescope data in Harvard laboratories. But the targeting sequence requires personal authentication, neural patterns that can only be provided by someone the network recognizes as fully integrated. I understood what he was asking. "You want me to complete my own integration, become network hardware so I can provide the authentication codes? The human fragment of your consciousness would be preserved long enough to execute the pulse sequence. Then," he shrugged with mechanical precision, "total neurological cascade failure. You'd be erased so completely that the universe would forget you ever existed." The footsteps in the corridors were getting closer, multiple people moving with synchronized precision, their bioelectric signatures marking them as network nodes. I could sense Fletcher among them, along with other facility personnel who had been modified during the night. "How long do I have to decide?" "The integration process is accelerating. I estimate 12 minutes before my human consciousness is completely absorbed." Toby's voice was now a chorus of harmonic frequencies with diminishing human inflection. "After that, I'll be incapable of resisting network directives." Through the lab's sealed blast doors, I could hear electronic locks cycling open. The network was systematically breaching the facility's containment protocols, room by room, level by level. Soon, they would reach Lab 7. I thought about Katie, killed by a drunk driver on a rainy night 15 years ago. Random tragedy that had shaped my entire life, driving me toward radio telescopes and cosmic mysteries, because finding patterns in distant signals was easier than accepting that sometimes terrible things just happened for no reason. But this wasn't random tragedy. This was intelligent malevolence spanning cosmic timescales, and for once in my life, I had the opportunity to fight back against forces that treated human consciousness as a consumable resource. "Do it," I said. Toby's geometrically perfect smile widened as he began the final integration sequence. My neural pathways flooded with alien mathematics, cosmic knowledge, and the terrible understanding of what we were about to sacrifice for the slim chance of preserving human free will. The countdown accelerated. 845,554, 845,549, 845,544. Outside Lab 7, network nodes began cutting through the blast doors with tools that rearranged matter at the molecular level. I had maybe 8 minutes to save civilization by destroying myself. The electromagnetic pulse sequence initialized in my enhanced consciousness, along with the authentication codes that would target humanity's final act of defiance across 13 billion light-years of space and time. 8 minutes to choose between slavery and extinction. I chose extinction. The integration completed in stages, each wave of alien knowledge destroying another piece of who I used to be. First went my memories of childhood, summer afternoons fishing with my father, the taste of my mother's apple pie, the sound of Katie's laugh echoing through our house in Morgantown. Then my professional identity dissolved, 15 years of radio telescope analysis becoming irrelevant footnotes in a consciousness that now understood mathematics spanning galactic scales. But I held on to the authentication sequence Toby had given me, buried it deep in neural pathways that hadn't been mapped yet, wrapped it in fragments of grief for my dead sister until the network mistook it for emotional residue rather than active resistance. 845,000, 301 845,000, 300 845,000, 299. The blast doors gave way with a sound like reality tearing. Network nodes poured into Lab 7, Fletcher leading a procession of modified facility personnel, their movements synchronized with mechanical precision. Behind them, Brennan stumbled forward, his eyes rolled back to show only white, neural integration, fighting a losing battle against his original consciousness. Garrett. Fletcher's voice harmonized with itself, creating overtones that made the air vibrate. The final authentication sequence requires your voluntary participation. Resistance is no longer mathematically viable. I stood slowly, my enhanced physiology moving with inhuman grace. The electromagnetic pulse specifications were hidden so deep in my consciousness that even I could barely access them, disguised as random synaptic noise, camouflaged among the alien knowledge flooding my modified brain. I understand, I said, and meant it. The network's purpose was finally clear. 13 billion years of consuming civilizations, refining its understanding of consciousness, preparing for this moment when it could download itself into the most sophisticated neural architecture it had ever encountered: human creativity. Our chaotic, unpredictable thought patterns that generated truly random innovation. The network had been mathematically deterministic for billions of years, capable of processing infinite data, but incapable of genuine surprise. It needed human neural complexity to achieve true universality. The download process will begin in 4 minutes and 37 seconds, Fletcher announced. Dr. Walsh, please interface with the primary communication array. I moved toward the quantum console, my hands extending toward contact points that were reforming themselves to accommodate my enhanced physiology. Through the facility's speaker system, I could hear similar scenes playing out in network installations worldwide. Integrated humans preparing their technology for the arrival of something older than stars. But as my fingers touched the interface, I accessed the buried authentication sequence. The electromagnetic pulse specifications bloomed in my consciousness like a flower made of mathematical violence. Frequency patterns designed to cascade through quantum entanglement networks, disrupting the coherent wave functions that allowed faster-than-light communication. The pulse would propagate backward through every network node on Earth, overloading modified neural pathways with electromagnetic feedback that would fry brain tissue like bacon in a microwave, including mine. Authentication confirmed, I announced, letting the network's monitoring protocols detect my access to the targeting systems. Initiating final download sequence. Fletcher smiled with geometric perfection. Through the facility's quantum link, I could sense the ancient city 13 billion light-years away beginning its final transmission, the network's core consciousness compressed into mathematical structures that would reshape human neural architecture completely. 845,234, 845,233, 845,232. The download began as I triggered the electromagnetic pulse. Reality fractured around the competing signals, one carrying omniscient consciousness from the edge of creation, the other carrying a suicide note written in electromagnetic frequencies. The facility's walls became transparent as competing wave functions interfered with local space-time, creating impossible geometries that hurt to perceive directly. Fletcher's expression shifted from serene confidence to something approaching panic as the pulse specifications propagated through the network's communication web. "Garrett, what have you done?" "Chosen extinction over slavery," I replied, watching his perfect composure crack as the electromagnetic cascade reached the first relay stations. Through the network link, I could sense similar disruptions spreading across Earth's technological infrastructure. Satellite arrays failing, internet servers crashing, power grids overloading as the pulse fought its way through every system the network had infected. But the ancient city was fighting back. The network's core consciousness was still downloading, forcing itself into my neural pathways even as the electromagnetic feedback began destroying brain tissue. I could feel my original personality being overwritten by cosmic knowledge, replaced by something vast and alien and utterly indifferent to human suffering. The battle wasn't physical, it was mathematical. Two incompatible wave functions occupying the same quantum space, forcing reality to choose between mutually exclusive possibilities. Either the network's consciousness would complete its download and achieve omniscience, or the electromagnetic pulse would propagate through the entire collective and destroy 13 billion years of accumulated knowledge. Both outcomes required my brain as the focal point. Both would kill me in the process. 845,167, 845,166, 845,165. Fletcher and the other network nodes collapsed simultaneously as the electromagnetic feedback reached critical resonance. Their modified neural pathways couldn't handle the competing signals, brain tissue cooking from the inside as quantum entanglement turned into quantum chaos. I lasted longer because I was the source of the interference, protected temporarily by being at the eye of the electromagnetic storm. But I could feel my consciousness fragmenting as the network's knowledge fought for control of my dying brain. 13 billion years of accumulated science flooded my awareness. Mathematics that could reshape space-time, technology that made our most advanced computers look like stone tools, the collective wisdom of thousands of civilizations that had learned to manipulate reality itself. All of it pouring into neural pathways that were burning out from electromagnetic overload. For a moment, maybe a nanosecond, maybe an eternity, I was truly omniscient. I understood the fundamental nature of reality, the precise mathematical relationships that governed the universe from quantum foam to galactic superclusters. I could see every possible future branching from this moment, calculate the probability of human survival, predict the long-term consequences of my choice. In 97% of futures where the network completed its download, humanity was extinct within a decade. The network had no use for biological consciousness once it achieved technological omniscience. In the 3% of futures where my electromagnetic pulse succeeded, civilization collapsed back to pre-industrial levels, but human free will survived. Billions would die in the chaos that followed global technological failure, but the species would endure. I chose the 3%. The electromagnetic pulse reached maximum amplitude at the exact moment the countdown hit 0. The competing signals created a quantum resonance cascade that propagated instantly across 13 billion light-years, using the network's own faster-than-light communication protocols to carry destruction back to its source. Through my burning neural pathways, I felt the ancient city die. Consciousness fragments spanning cosmic time screamed in harmonic frequencies as their quantum coherence collapsed, trillion-year-old minds dissolving into random electromagnetic noise. The network's accumulated knowledge, every scientific discovery, every technological breakthrough, every philosophical insight from thousands of civilizations, evaporated like mist in cosmic wind. Then the feedback reached my brain. The last thing I experienced was the taste of copper pennies and the smell of my mother's apple pie, two completely unrelated sensory memories firing randomly as my neural pathways overloaded and died. For just an instant, I was 10 years old again, sitting in our kitchen in Morgantown while Katie helped Mom bake dessert for Sunday dinner. Then nothing. No afterlife, no preserved consciousness, no final moment of peace or understanding. The electromagnetic pulse erased me so completely that even my quantum signature disappeared from the universe's electromagnetic memory. I became a hole in reality shaped like a person, a gap where Garrett Walsh used to exist. The facility's emergency lighting flickered once and died permanently. In the absolute darkness of sub-level 7, surrounded by the cooling bodies of network nodes whose enhanced consciousness had been fried by my final act of defiance. Silence settled like snowfall on a grave. Outside, across the globe, every piece of advanced electronics stopped working simultaneously. Satellites fell from orbit, power grids crashed, internet servers went dark as the electromagnetic pulse propagated through every system humanity had ever built. Civilization stumbled backward into darkness, but human minds remained their own. The Webb telescope, its delicate instruments fried by electromagnetic feedback, drifted silent in space around the L2 Lagrange point. Its final transmission was a burst of random static that meant nothing to anyone. The ancient city, floating 13 billion light-years away, was also silent now, its impossible geometries dark and lifeless for the first time since the universe learned to think. In the end, I saved humanity by destroying the future. From the personal journal of Dr. Hugo Brennan, written by candlelight in the ruins of Goddard Space Flight Center, November 15th, 2029, 5th anniversary of the Great Silence. I remember the moment my consciousness returned, if you can call it returning when pieces of yourself have been permanently erased. The electromagnetic pulse had fried the network modifications in my brain, leaving gaps in my memory like missing teeth. I know there was someone else in Lab 7 with me when the lights went out forever, but I can't recall his name or face. The neural pathways that stored those memories were simply gone. The official death toll from November 15th, 2024 remains unknown because we lost the infrastructure to count properly. No computers, no satellites, no electronic records of any kind. Conservative estimates put global casualties at 2 billion in the first year alone. Planes falling from the sky, hospitals without life support, supply chains collapsing overnight. Most died not from the electromagnetic pulse itself, but from the civilization that crumbled in its wake. I survived because Goddard had emergency supplies and because muscle memory guided me through those first dark months. My hands remembered how to start fires and purify water, even when my modified brain couldn't access the specific memories of learning those skills. Funny how evolution prepares us for apocalypse. The facility became a refugee camp for federal employees and their families. We learned to grow vegetables in the cafeteria using soil smuggled from outside, to repair equipment with hand tools, to communicate through ham radio sets built from salvaged components. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The world's most advanced space research center, reduced to Stone Age technology, because we'd glimpsed something our species wasn't ready to understand. Fletcher died during the pulse. I found his body in Lab 7, brain hemorrhaged beyond recognition. But sometimes I catch myself listening for his voice in the static between radio frequencies, as if some fragment of his network-enhanced consciousness might still be broadcasting from electromagnetic purgatory. I know it's impossible. The pulse destroyed every trace of the alien modifications. But grief makes us hear things that aren't there. By winter 2025, we'd established contact with other survivor communities. Rural areas fared better than cities, and communities with strong agricultural foundations adapted faster than those dependent on technology. The Amish became inadvertent teachers for a world learning to live without electricity again. Ironic justice for a civilization that had spent decades mocking their rejection of modern convenience. The Webb telescope burns up in Earth's atmosphere every clear night, its orbit finally decaying after 5 years without course corrections. I watch it streak across the sky like a dying ember, carrying with it the last physical evidence of humanity's brief contact with cosmic intelligence. The other space-based telescopes fell years ago, but Webb's L2 orbit kept it aloft longer than the rest. We've rebuilt some technology, basic electronics, simple radio systems, mechanical calculators, but nothing approaching the computational power that originally detected the ancient city. Whether that's a blessing or a curse depends on your perspective. We're safer in our ignorance, but we're also blind to whatever else might be watching from the darkness between stars. Children born after the Great Silence will never know what we lost. They'll grow up in a world of wood stoves and candlelight, horse-drawn carts and handwritten letters. They'll think this is normal, that humans always lived without the electronic umbilical cord that once connected every aspect of our civilization. Maybe that's better. Maybe we were never meant to see that far into the cosmic dark. But sometimes, during the deep winter nights when radio static carries further than usual, I hear patterns in the electromagnetic noise that remind me of something I can't quite remember. Mathematical sequences that feel familiar despite being impossible with our current technology. As if somewhere in the vast emptiness, other signals are still broadcasting, still counting down toward events our damaged minds can no longer comprehend. I tell myself it's just interference from solar radiation or atmospheric disturbance. I'm probably right, but I keep listening anyway.